The Power of Illumination, Franklin Merrell Wolff. I have been dipping into Whitman during the last few days with the perspective of the consciousness I have called satisfaction and high indifference. He has become essentially clear. Most of the remaining obscurity in his writings has also been clarified by interpreting his language in the more obvious and simpler sense. In assuming in his work an involved meaning, as I have done heretofore, I found him baffling. But when I took his words as carrying the more simple and direct meaning, I found a very great increase of clarity. Whitman combines illumination with remarkable objective simplicity. It is the illumination that makes Whitman great. There are some men who are so great on the level of relative consciousness alone that they are effective forces in the world for centuries and even millennia. Aristotle is an outstanding example of such greatness. I find nothing of this kind of greatness in Whitman. If he had had a high order of capacity in the purely relative sense, it would hardly be conceivable that the great or illumined Whitman could not have made his earlier writings, those written before illumination, live. In fact, only his illumined work has power, but it has unmistakably great power. This fact, however, simply increases the value of Whitman as an example of what illumination means. On the other hand, men like Dante and Francis Bacon are not nearly as good examples for the study of illumination, for both of these men, particularly the latter, were men of ability and training in the relative field. It is very probable that Bacon would have had a place in history even though he had not attained the cosmic consciousness. Hence, the contrast between the illumined and the merely egoistic Bacon does not have the sharpness that is so marked in Whitman. It is hard to imagine that without illumination, Whitman would ever have been known beyond his own immediate circle. How great, then, is the force of illumination? An effective measure of it cannot be attained, but some men do show its force in relative isolation. Whitman and Balzac are notable examples in recent times who afford us the marked contrast between the powers of the men before illumination and what they became afterward. Western history gives us two other conspicuous examples. These are Jesus and Jacob Boehme, one a carpenter and the other a shoemaker. Each of these was a man of fine personal character, but neither of them was great enough, in the purely egoistic sense, to have left any mark on history. It is unnecessary to remark upon the importance these men achieved after winning the higher consciousness, especially in the case of the former. There are undoubtedly other men of this kind to be found, particularly in India, but some of these lived and died in retreats, and lived seen by men but under the vow of silence. Therefore, they have not constituted a recognizable force in history and do not live for the open record. Other men of greater ability in terms of ordinary egoistic consciousness who subsequently attain the higher consciousness do not afford good examples, for the contrast between the two levels is not so marked. The difference between these two types may be illustrated in the following way. Nearly everyone can note the fact when a rather ordinary hill is raised to the magnitude of a high mountain, as by a sudden action of geologic forces. On the other hand, if an already high mountain with its top lost in the clouds were suddenly raised to a still grander height, only a few would be able to appreciate this fact. Finally, only those who dwell above the clouds can measure the relative altitude of the mighty peaks with just appreciation. So it is with the great men of illumination. The illumination is one fact. The form which its partial expression takes within the subject-object field is something quite different. All illumined men form one community. They are one brotherhood grounded in mutual understanding and fundamental agreement. On the other hand, their mode of expression in relative terms are as variable as are the differences in the development of personality. In principle, any mode of expression that exists in this world is a possible vehicle for illumined consciousness. In formal terms, not all these expressions are consistent with each other. They may even be far from correct in the scientific sense, but they all carry the reality in greater or less degree. Reality being understood as that which can be known only by awakening to another dimension of consciousness. Hence, any and all of these expressions from the beyond are of highest value to men. For a diamond is always a diamond, whether embedded in clay or washed clean, whether a rough stone or caught and polished. At one end of the scale, illumined men give us diamonds embedded in considerable clay, while at the other, they supply us with diamonds well cleaned, cut to mathematically true angles that reflect most perfectly the contained light, and polished to the last degree of refinement. The latter is unquestionably the more finished offering, but all are equal in this, that a diamond is a diamond. So also are all manifestations of realized consciousness equal, in that they are from a source rooted in the beyond or the infinite. For my own part, I must prefer the polishing of a Plato to the rough hewing of a Whitman. But unquestionably, Whitman is an open way for some for whom Plato is a closed door. And all ways that men need are acceptable to me in the larger sense. But the way of the rugged and simple man is no more the divine way than that which fits the needs of highly cultured and aristocratic spirit. In fact, when it comes to the final showing, the real snobs in this world are not the highly cultured and aristocratic people, but a certain only partially finished group who feed their own pride by glorifying crudity and insist that the crude way is the best way. The illumined man will do what is necessary to meet his people, and if they require crudity, he will manifest through crudity. But this does not mean that he despises finished and polished workmanship, nor those who prefer that truth should be offered in a beautiful setting.